Welcome to the Pioneer edition of Globewatch 2018. I am Charles EBUNE in Yaoundé. Over 2.5 billion of the world's 7 billion people live within the confines of the world's largest geocultural association, which counts roughly some 53 countries. 30 of them are simply called small states and cover an economic environment worth $10 trillion globally, and happens to be one of the most giant multinational diplomatic institutions in the world. We are talking about the Commonwealth of Nations, whose modern-day construction was partly the work of India's pioneer Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru, and today headed by the first female as Secretary General, who equally happens to be the first female and the black woman to be the Queen's Consul, and the first woman to be British Attorney General ever since the post was created in 1313. Can the Gentleman's Club clearly justify its place in the current global alliance system? The Secretary General of the Commonwealth, Patricia Janet Scotland, welcome to Globewatch.
Thank you very much, Charles.
The Commonwealth is the largest geocultural association in the world, numbering some 2.5 billion citizens, and covers a land area of roughly 31 million square kilometers, roughly 33% of the world. Of recent, the association has made a series of political miscalculations. Why?
Well, I don't know what political miscalculations you're speaking about, Charles, because the Commonwealth is a voluntary association of these 52 countries, soon to be 53. We are able to work in unison together as a result of a mandate given to us by all our heads. And the values of the Commonwealth are inculcated into the Charter, the Commonwealth Charter, which was signed into being by the Queen on Commonwealth Day in Marlborough House in 2013. And those principles, the 16 principles of the Commonwealth Charter, were subsequently mirrored in the Sustainable Development Goals, which were then inculcated for the whole of the UN in September 2015. So I think there have been some real successes in the Commonwealth, and the Commonwealth is now seemingly going from strength to strength.
I said a series of political miscalculations. The former director of the Commonwealth Department in the Cameroonian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Felix Mbayu, sits today as the chief scribe of that government department, once described the Commonwealth as having an indelible mark when it comes to elections. He used to be guest on this program. But when elections were held in Kenya, the Commonwealth produced a report in which it stated through its chief observer, former Ghanaian President John Dramani Mahama, that the elections were transparent, free and fair. And just days after the Supreme Court of Kenya said it was an electoral sham full of irregularities. Was that a statement that the Commonwealth should have regretted?
The first thing to say is that the Commonwealth Election Observation Team went to observe the elections with what they saw, what they heard, and what they perceived. And the election difficulty that arose in relation to the technical counting of the election process. And you'll remember that the observers made it clear that if there were technical and other difficulties, the way in which to challenge the efficacy of the election was to take that matter up through the courts in accordance with the rule of law. That was what former President Mahama advised should be done as the appropriate process under the Kenyan constitution to verify the efficacy of that election. And indeed, that was what was done. And in accordance with good governance and the rule of law, the Supreme Court in Kenya was able to observe all those matters, and it was challenged. So the process overall, if I may respectfully say so, was one which was in compliance with what we would most like to see in terms of the rule of law. It is true that those who go to observe the elections can only observe what they see physically. They aren't able to review the mechanical operations of methods which were put in place. And one of the things that's come out of that election is to look to see how, through technical and other advice, we can now look at what is a new emerging challenge. Because as elections go from marking on a piece of paper to digitally verifying what has been done, the complexity of observing elections has certainly become more intense.
Well, you have observed at least 140 elections ever since the Commonwealth elections observer missions started. When you see the way elections are being conducted around the world today, as a member of one of the most important voices in the democratic realm, do you think that the Commonwealth values are threatened in our current space?
Well, I hope they're not, because the Commonwealth values contained in the Commonwealth Charter are not only what we would like to see and therefore aspirational, but they are values which are actually being delivered in a great number of our member states. And the value of being together as a family is that each member state has an opportunity to encourage, to assist, and to help other members of states. And what we're doing in the Commonwealth is looking together at what works. It's particularly important, of course, to have the legal structures, to have the instruments, but it is even more important to see implementation of these new structures. And what is sad is many of our countries from time to time have the most beautiful laws which look perfect. It's not just the beauty of the law that matters, it's the implementation. Our citizens have to be able to touch it, taste it, see it, and experience it to be really valuable. And what we now are doing in the Commonwealth together is accumulating our knowledge and our expertise of what works, but also we are sharing our expertise in relation to what has not worked, because that collaboration is what will give us a greater degree of delivery when it comes to those values and those aspirations. And I'm very proud that the Commonwealth is seeing increasing success in terms of implementation.
The Commonwealth is roughly 32 republics. 16 of them are monarchs. About 5 of them are independent monarchs, because the other ones are Commonwealth realms, in wherein the Queen is equally the head of state. You have roughly 30 small states. You are a world of the richest nations on earth and the smallest nations on earth. How do you succeed to bind all those elements together? Just how exceptional is the Commonwealth multiculturalism experience to other communities?
I think it's a quite remarkable alignment of countries. As you rightly say, we have countries of every shape, every size. We have rich ones, poor ones, island states, landlocked states, large states, small states, and we cover 6 regions and about 78% of all the oceans in the world. And that complexity of culture, of religion, of language is bound together with some fundamental things. So, for example, for the Commonwealth, common law construct, we share the predominant language, which is English. We have the common law, which is shared by all of the countries working together. We have parliamentary systems based primarily on the Westminster model, common institutions and common approaches in many of our countries to civil society groups. Now that value system is what binds us. It's not linguistic. It's not cultural, it's not regional, it is value-based. And what is so unique about it, it's the only constellation of countries when you sit around the table which permits the smallest country, like Nauru and Tuvalu, who have 11 or 14,000 people, to sit round the same table with India, which has 1.3 billion people.
And at least 554 million voting in an election,
Absolutely.
the largest democracy in the world.
Absolutely. And so what you get from that is an intensity of understanding, and we in essence have a pilot for every other region, every other race, every other culture, every other language in the world, because thousands of languages are spoken across the Commonwealth, and many, many thousands of different cultural nuances across the Commonwealth, but all bound together. And when we look at the next Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting, which will take place in London, all of these countries will be able to talk about the things that matter to them. And what is quite extraordinary is that whether you're a micro-state, a mini-state, a medium state, or a very large state, we are all faced with similar challenges. All our countries are seeking to deliver the Sustainable Development Goals. We are all pressured by what's happening now with climate. If you see in the last few months, we had mudslides in Sierra Leone. We had a drop in the rainfall, particularly affecting Africa, by 35%. So an increase in desertification.
Especially in East Africa, where at least 25 million people are
Absolutely.
under food insecurity because of drought.
Exactly. And drought has also led to migration. Because if there isn't enough food security, if there's not enough opportunity for livelihood, people will move. And so this desertification which is happening is incredibly important. But then look at what happened across Asia. We had flooding in Sri Lanka, in Bangladesh, in Pakistan, and in India. Thousands died, and many thousands, if not millions, were displaced. Okay. And then in the Caribbean, the hurricanes,
Irma and others.
And my own country was virtually destroyed.
The Dominican Republic?
No, I'm not the Dominican Republic.
Absolutely, I'm talking about...
I'm the Commonwealth. We are the Commonwealth of Dominica, and
sure.
And we were hit by tropical by Maria and suffered greatly.
Baroness, you were just talking about the challenges facing the Commonwealth. I believe one of them equally should be the rise of populism in Europe, or if you like, the transatlantic community in particular. And you saw the impact it had on Brexit, and the arrival of Donald Trump at the White House is a kind of brand of politics wherein multinational diplomacy is seen as a threat to the existence of states. How do you respond as a Commonwealth community?
Well, I don't know that the White House has yet spoken about the Commonwealth, but I can certainly say that the experience that I have had in talking to our leaders within the Commonwealth, that the feeling is coming now that there has never been a more important moment to have the Commonwealth, which is a multilateral organization, multifaceted, which is consensual. No one has to belong to the Commonwealth. It's not an organization where there is any compulsion for any member to be a member. And yet we see so many new members wanting to migrate towards the Commonwealth because of what the Commonwealth stands for. An association of countries bound together by values and aspirations. And if you look at the Mo Ibrahim Index and of good governance in Africa, you will see that the 18 countries...
You're talking about the British Sudanese billionaire.
I don't know whether that's how Mo Ibrahim would describe himself.
Absolutely. It's a journalistic description.
Yeah, it's a journalistic description which I think you should take up with him. He may not be quite happy with that
Absolutely.
description.
Absolutely.
And so, but he has committed himself very strongly to Africa, Pan-Africanism, and looking at good governance. And through that index, which I think is accepted as a frank and objective assessment based on the empirical data, it's clear that the 18 Commonwealth countries have done better than many. They're in the first and the second tranche of that index. So there is something that happens through good governance, through coming together, which is certainly of value. And this opportunity to share good practice has been something which, during my tenure as Commonwealth Secretary General, I have tried to really enhance. So the creation of the Office of Civil and Criminal Justice Reform, which allows us to share legislative and other tools. The opportunity now, we are creating an innovation hub. So innovations that come from across the Commonwealth can be shared, so that if one of our member states spends £1, a dollar, a franc creating something of value, then perhaps no other member state needs to spend the same dollar or penny or pound or franc.
Let's talk about your visit to Cameroon, and let me pick one issue which is of contention to most Cameroonians today: education. You are coming to the country where there are serious disturbances in the northwest and southwest part of the country. I know that the American administration invaded Afghanistan in 2001 because there was a government in power that refused children from going to school. I know that Boko Haram, everybody is fighting it because they have disturbed children, girls in particular, from going to school, and we label them terrorists. I want you, as the Secretary General of the Commonwealth and as one of the masters and best known symbols of the English language on earth, to give me an adjective to describe people in the northwest and southwest of Cameroon who are doing everything for children not to go to school. We live in a world where the education of the girl child is already, first of all, a stressful exercise.
Well, we in the Commonwealth have done everything to promote education and well-being, and you'll know that there is a fundamental principle in terms of equality between gender, but also equality between all our citizens. And everything I have heard since I've been here indicates to me that education of children is something which everyone promotes, and no one is suggesting to me, not opposition parties, not the government parties, that stopping children from going to school is an acceptable thing to do.
At least they have told you that there are children who are not going to school in that part of the country, right?
There have been reports that the children weren't going to school for quite some time, and that most of the children are now back at school, and no one has suggested to me that children's non-attendance to school, particularly young women and young girls, is at all acceptable. So I think what everyone has been saying to me since I've been here is that there is a real need for dialogue in order to address some of the difficulties which have been long-standing and are evidenced now by what is taking place in various parts in Cameroon. But it's also been emphasized to me that this is not solely a francophone, anglophone issue. It's an issue about the unity, and it's also an issue about making sure that everyone has access to a similar quality of rights, responsibilities and opportunities. It's about fairness. And I know that this is something which everyone I have spoken to date is saying there needs to be peace, but there needs to be dialogue. And that dialogue has to be open and express itself in a way that is inclusive of all the voices who need to be listened to in order to get a just and lasting solution.
I still come back to that question. What kind of adjective should be given to people who prevent children from going to school? In Nigeria, Boko Haram, we label them terrorists. In Afghanistan, we call them terrorists. You know the story of Malala Yousafzai very well, right?
No matter how enticed I am by those who want to interview me, because I actually believe in truth, I believe in moderation, and I believe in giving full and proper answers. I would rather say that it is to be discouraged for anyone to prevent children to go to school. 60% of our Commonwealth are below the age of 30. Here in Cameroon, 60% are below the age of 25. They are our future. The speed with which our world is changing means that the real wealth will not be in our geographical location, will not be in our physical circumstances. Our real wealth is in our people. So investing in our human capital will be what will really make our countries rich. And our children are going to live in a digitalized and different world to that which many of us grew up in. Without education, without skills, without opportunity, we will none of us be rich. So if we want a rich, truly wealthy country, each of these countries, each of our countries, we need to invest in our children, we need to invest in their well-being, their health and their education, and we have to create opportunities for them. So anyone who deprives children of those opportunities must be deprecated.
I introduced you as the first black woman or of black descent to be the Queen's Consort and the youngest woman in that domain. I equally introduced you as the first British Attorney General female ever since the post was created in 1313, roughly. It should be in the 14th century. And I equally introduced you as the first female Secretary General of the Commonwealth, which is expected to have a global economic turnover of roughly $13 trillion by 2020, roughly a year after the British must have left the European Union. What kind of fresh impetus have you brought into the association?
Well, one of the things that I've tried to do is to use the skills that I have developed over the years in terms of having been a parliamentarian, having been a senior lawyer, and having been involved in diplomacy for a number of years, to look at what we have in common. And I've seen that there's a great richness in our Commonwealth because of the commonality I've just described earlier in the interview. We discovered that there's a 19% advantage in being a member of the Commonwealth in terms of trading with each other, faster, easier, better. So one of the things I would like to do is put the wealth back into Commonwealth, but I'd also like to put the common back into wealth.
Absolutely.
So there is a huge opportunity. What if we could improve that 19% advantage to 30%, so that we could make our countries more able to have the resources to actually deliver on the Sustainable Development Goals. I want to concentrate on trying to eradicate corruption from our systems, because we know that the country's resources and the resources that they need to deliver on the SDGs, the sum difference between those two is the sum siphoned off globally by corruption. So looking at Sustainable Development Goal 16, which is about the justice, that is something which I think that we can do, and that's why I created the Office of Civil and Criminal Justice Reform. But there are issues we've touched on climate change. I want us to develop a more regenerative approach to climate change so that we will restore some of the trouble that we've inflicted. But we need to support our women, because getting women involved in our leadership, in our delivery of justice system, but also into our businesses, is going to increase and enhance our opportunity.
Terrorism, be it in the UK, be it in Cameroon, be it in Nigeria, be it in Kenya, West, around the globe, it's a huge security concern. Each time the Secretary General of the Commonwealth takes her sleep, what bothers her most?
Well, I am very bothered about countering violent extremism, and we do have a countering violent extremism unit where we are trying to pool together all the things that we can do to help our countries to better address those issues. But actually, I worry greatly about peace, I worry about good governance, and I worry about equality, human rights, because if we don't have peace, if we don't have equality, if we can't create an environment where each of our citizens believes that they can give of their best, then we will never have the sort of Commonwealth that we ideally need to have. So I do worry about that, and I worry about all of our countries. And I hope and pray that we will achieve all the things in the Commonwealth charter that we've set out to believe. I believe we can if we choose. If we choose as 2.4 billion people to come together and deliver the Sustainable Development Goals, I believe we can do it. And if we do that, we will create a pathway for the rest of the world to follow, because we are 1/3 of the world, and every different culture, religion, and race on the earth can see themselves reflected in the faces of our Commonwealth citizens. So that's what keeps me up at night, but that's also what drives me. And I also know that by God's grace, all things are possible.
The Secretary General of the Commonwealth, the Right Honourable Patricia Janet Scotland, thank you very much indeed for being guest on Globewatch.
Thank you very much.
You are welcome.